Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us here on a Monday evening, the first day of March. Our building administrators have done a great job throughout the year communicating with you. But I wanted to take the opportunity to pull us all together as a district beyond our school committee meetings. We're scheduled for 1 hour. I have a brief presentation, and then we're going to open it up for some questions. If you do have questions, please put them in the chat. Since Mr. Missler is unavailable tonight, Ms. Belleville drew the short straw, and she will be helping me tonight, and she'll be facilitating those questions. We do have some administrators here. Others are at different meetings this evening. If we don't have an answer to your question, we will be following up with a frequently asked questions document that we'll put on the website or we'll send out to folks. Our agenda is quite brief. We're going to take a quick look back where we have been here in Uxbridge Public Schools since the pandemic started last March. And we're going to talk about where we are going forward. The first thing I'd like to start with, just thank yous. It was a year ago, it was March 13th. Our world got turned upside down here in Uxbridge. Our parents, our students, our teachers, administrators, staff, cafeteria workers, maintenance staff, IT, school secretaries, central office staff members, department leaders, everyone had their world absolutely rocked. And I just want to thank everybody for coming together. This has been such a burden for everyone, both personally, professionally, mentally, emotionally, physically. And I could not be more proud of how far we've come working together and how we've reacted as a community. And that's as a community of Uxbridge, school community, individual schools, departments, and teams. Everyone has taken this huge leap of faith together for one common goal, and that's doing right by our kids. So thank you, thank you, thank you, and thank you. The word unprecedented, it's a word I probably used 1,000 times since last March. Other people may use other words to describe the pandemic, but it's one that I felt needed highlighting here. Unprecedented, without previous instance, never before known or experienced, unexampled or unparalleled. And in that orange box are a few synonyms for the word unprecedented. Some of my favorites are outlandish, freakish, and uncommon. When this pandemic hit, and as we try to make sense of it, and we try to make forward, as we try to move forward, it was every step we took was we weren't sure of it. And in a world of school, I've been on a school calendar since I was 4 and started kindergarten. It's very predictable. It starts in September, it ends in June. And there are just some routines that we've all gotten ourselves into. Last spring, what the end of the year looked like, what the following day looked like was an adventure every single day, with our IT staff scrambling, our cafeteria staff scrambling, our teachers, our administrators, dealing with a collective sense of loss and foreboding and uncertainty, developing models for education, becoming a one-to-one school district overnight in terms of technology, working with our teachers union and our bargaining units to work collaboratively to put together an MOA that worked for everyone. And we look back now a year later in terms of what we had put in place, may not have been the best educational model, but given what we had to work with, we're proud of what we did, and we did the best we could. Putting together the closure for the end of the year with the parades that we had at the schools, with putting together graduation, trying to figure out how students can get stuff out of their lockers. It really was unprecedented, a closing of a school year like we have never seen and hope to never see again. Once we came to that end of the school year, we moved into our planning for our new normal. And with our new normal came guidance at the federal level, the state level, both in health professionals as well as educational professionals. And what you can see on the screen here is just the amount of information having to have all school districts, all municipalities digest in a very short period of time. It's been continuously changing. Our first guidance for reopening this school year came in June 25th. So just a short from June to September, we needed to put our game plans together. Since that time, up until February 11th, the most recent guidance came out. There's about 250 pages that that we have to plow through in terms of making this thing work. Our staff worked all summer to bring our students and our staff in safely. And again, the collaboration was tremendous. Everybody was scared. There were a lot of unknowns. I remember the conversations we were having last year in terms of mask wearing, things that we take for granted now, hand sanitizer, how we could have students enter the building. But as we've restructured our organization, and remember, we're a $25 million organization, Uxbridge Public Schools, everything needed to be retooled in a very short period of time. Our school committee working at the policy level. If you think of human resources with the continuous changes in leaves, absences, illnesses, staff with medical conditions, we had to hire a number of new staff, long-term subs, and for synchronous learning and how we do teacher evaluations. Finance, Mr. Hyde's department with the multitude of grants and the items we had to spend money on that we hadn't had to previously. Facilities, making sure our ventilation, our cleaning, our sanitizing stations, our signage, the physical layout and the operation of the school, from mitigation strategies, distancing, mask, hand washing, cohorting of students, scheduling, putting together 4 models of instruction, safety protocols. Nurse Becky's on the line with us. Her team, she is our lead nurse. Her team with Ms. Schiller and Ms. Gothier have been absolutely lights out, working on our protocols, medication drop-offs, training for PPE for staff and families. And the list goes on and on. But the most important thing that we do, and what we do for a living, is developing learning models for working with our students so the kids can learn and our staff can teach. And being able to develop 4 models of instruction that we have not really seen before in the way that they're presented, and developing those with assistance, working together from scratch is just absolutely incredible. And when you look at the models on the screen there, from in-person, hybrid learning, to remote learning, to our 4 cohorts, still happening simultaneously right now in our district. And the ability for our staff to manage that, our administrators, and for our teachers to engage in training so that they can be able to work with your children, both academically and socially and emotionally, is just a heavy lift, and one that was filled with trepidation, but one with commitment. And again, the focus is on meeting the needs of your kids. And collectively, we're still doing that. Our technology department and putting together learning management systems, putting in security, working with parents on their own home technology issues, our content platforms, our curriculum department, working with our IT, with our teachers. Really amazing what has been put together in such a short period of time. And by the which, when we come out the other side, and the skills that we've developed, not only individually as teachers, but as an organization, the level of flexibility that we'll have will be much stronger moving forward. Again, we could talk about the transportation as well. It was all in the service of kids, and we continuously, every day, work to make ourselves better and to plan for what's coming in the future. And so, as you can see on the screen, when we started this summer, our focus as administrators, as educators, as school committee, we know that students learn best when they're in person with their teacher, working with their same age peers, in the presence of good curriculum and solid instruction. So our goal was to have students in school where possible, but the number one job was to keep them safe, keep our staff safe, students, families. This summer, we started with our ESY. This is our extended school year. And we were one of the few school districts in the area to actually have our students in the schools this summer. And what that had done for us was that had given us, had forced our planning, but also too gave us kind of a dry run with a small population and be able to give us some specific feedback in terms of making sure that we're successful come September. When we were here in September, and again, you see a little parentheses, the 6 foot. This is at a 6 foot distance in terms of social distancing. Again, if you go back a year and we looked at all of the unknowns that we had, not only as a district, but as a country and as a planet, we took very cautious steps, very deliberate steps. As you know, the CDC had recommended 6 foot spacing in schools for social distancing. Our Department of Elementary and Secondary Education here in Massachusetts, along with the Department of Public Health, had recommended 6 feet, but no less than 3 feet. And they've maintained that that spacing and still continue to maintain that spacing. So they're on the same page with the CDC, but the CDC is more restrictive. Our school committee and working with our teachers, we had agreed that coming into the school year, we would be at 6 feet, just out of an abundance of caution. Where we have our cohort C, this is our group of students who are all in. We have at each school high need students identified through our teams that we felt really needed to be with us 5 days a week. We started with our preschool classes, 3 classes that started all in, and they've been all in since day one. In our kindergarten classes, we have, we know particularly that our youngest learners, remote learning's not good at any level necessarily for our students on a prolonged basis. However, we knew for our kindergarten students, we wanted them all in, and we worked diligently with our teachers and our parents, our administrators, to make sure that we were able to provide that. So at 6 feet, we have 7 classes of kindergarten since day one and 1 remote class. Before I move on too, I just wanted to be able to identify advantages that have been provided to us either through the state or through different organizations. We were one of 8 pilot school districts in the state to work with the Parabola project. This was the group who was developing the guidance and the advice in conjunction with the state elementary secondary education department. And we, over the summer, before other districts had access to this information, we were able to pilot it for them. So that helped us in our planning. Through Nurse Becky's efforts, we were in the first wave of school districts to be engaged in the BINEX testing, and she could talk a little bit more about that. And just now, though we weren't in the first wave, we have applied for the pool testing across the Commonwealth, where we can take samples of our students with permission and our staff so that we know where we are in terms of the virus within our schools. The focus on our youngest learners in January through Ms. Belleville, Ms. Squire's efforts and all of our efforts. She advocated for, or they advocated to bring back our first graders. We worked out a plan. We're able to bring 6, we have 6 in-person classes and we have 1 remote classroom. Where we have room at 6 feet and wanting our students, remember our goal from day one, if we could have students working in person with a teacher and their peers, we wanted to do it. Again, as all the guidance comes in and all the information, there's a lot to sift through. And making sure that we have the systems in place to support these changes. As of right now, we have plans in place for grade 2 to be coming back, and you can see on the screen the number of classes. Grade 3, we have a large cohort of students at grade 3, 129 students versus like say 106 at second grade, I believe, and working to make that work. In grade 4, to bring those students back at 6 feet. We have the room, we'll have the staffing, and asking administrators where else we could possibly do this at this time. Mr. Marco and Mr. Irvine are working on grade 7 and pulling them back. Now, again, this is, we're working out of necessity in terms of if you're a 5th grade parent right now, or you're a 6th grade parent, why not grade 5 and why not grade 6? Right now, simply, it's with the parameters in which we're working. We physically don't have that room right now. So that's where we are currently. I just wanted to remind folks that the key to all this is the mitigation strategies and just the absolute dogged persistence of all of us in terms of keeping each other safe through wearing masks, through washing our hands, staying home when we're ill, and keeping our distance. It's been, when they talk about the transmission rates in the schools, both here in Uxbridge and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, across the country and across the world, because we are able to have such an impact in terms of maintaining these mitigation strategies, transition has been low to nil. In our district, we've had the possibility of 1 transmission in school. We do have an ongoing tally of cases that are on our website, but those cases are students or staff contracting the virus outside of Uxbridge Public Schools. And through the diligence of our Board of Health, who has been tremendous, and through our nurses in support with our administrators through the contact tracing, we've been able to work with families and students to be able to have them isolate or quarantine and do the right thing so that we can continue with our work of educating your children. Those efforts, it's not something we were doing the year before. Again, this is new for us, but it's amazing what you get used to and what becomes your new normal. Going from the new normal to our next normal, whatever that may be. Our next normal is working our way back to having all of our students, all of our staff here in Uxbridge Public Schools, and looking at a continuum for that. Right now, as a country, as a state, we seem to be going in the right direction, finally. Our cases are coming down. Uxbridge is in the green for the first time in a long time. Yes. With the cases down, with the transmission rates down, with vaccinations going up, looking at, and our commissioner is, as well as us here in Uxbridge, how do we start bringing all of our students back where they need to be with us? And that's something our administrative team, we've been working on this since day one. And we've been inching closer and closer to that. The other day, the Commissioner of Education, Jeff Riley, he came out with, he had shared with us a phased-in plan, or he's developing a phased-in approach for bringing all students back to school for in-person learning. It's not defined, it's not approved yet. He needs to go to the Board of Education, the board that oversees him, and he's seeking to grant the authority to designate what learning time is in terms of schools working with students. And should he have that, and what he's looking to do is be measured and cautious, as we all are, minimize risk of students, staff, and families, but also to pulling our earliest learners back in his goal, as he stated, to have our youngest learners back, elementary students, all in by the first week of April. And that's good news because we've been going in that direction on our own. Mind you, he did say that he would still leave an option for parents who would choose to have their children remain remote from now until the end of the year. And I don't believe that will be an option next year. But this is where the commissioner is headed. And I applaud his leadership, and I applaud the recognition that we all need to come back to school. The key there is that we need to do so safely. And it's right now you have a lot of school districts working on their own, trying to develop all these measures. And any time that we can come together and go in the same direction as a collection of communities is always a good thing. I didn't say it's going to be easy, but I said that we're going in the right direction. As I see it too, a lot of this transition back into all in-person learning has to do with the medical number of positive cases, new strands of virus, the ability for testing, both in district and outside, as well as vaccinations. The governor was on today, and we're getting, I may not get this right, I believe step 2 of phase 3 in terms of reopening the Commonwealth, as well as they're moving through their levels of folks to be vaccinated. And in the next level, as I understand it, are educators. And that's not just teachers, that's educators, including all support staff, bus drivers, cafeteria workers, people who work with your children. And that would go a long way as well in terms of ensuring the safety of our students and our staff while they're in our buildings, as well as maintaining the mitigation strategies that we have so far effectively put into place. The last part, in terms of collective bargaining, anytime there's a change in working conditions, our bargaining units, our teachers unions, and associated unions have the opportunity to bargain the impact of those changes. And as I mentioned at the outset, we've worked closely with our teachers. We've worked in our staff. We were one of the first districts in the state to have the first MOA in terms of coming back to school. I know the collaboration is there. Everybody wants to make sure that we're doing the right thing, A, by kids, number one, B, making sure that it's safe for everyone. And it's that triad that I see in terms of what's the latest research coming down from the Department of Health, through the regulations or the guidance through DESE, and working with the medical information that we have available to us, and working with our teachers and staff to make sure that we implement it in the most effective way possible. And as we get more information from the commissioner, right now I've shared with you where our plan is right this minute, up to date. By the 22nd, we look to be all in pre-K to 4, with parents still having the option to have their child or children learn remotely for the remainder of the school year. We have room with grade 7, and therefore moving forward in that area. And we're continuously looking at the high school, and we're continuously working at grades 5 and 6. And depending on regulations and so forth, things may be changing. And with that, we're going to move right to the Q&A. And again, folks, I kept it to a few slides. I know folks have a lot of questions. Hopefully I laid this out for you so that either I've answered some of your questions or it generated a couple more. So Miss Belville, you are in charge of everything right now. You're doing a fine job. And
Why, thank you so much, Dr. Tano. I did let Nurse Becky in as a co-host, as there are some questions just around COVID protocols and if the same procedures for COVID protocols will be followed, as well as if students will continue to have access to learning. I can let her answer the COVID questions, but as far as access to learning, I certainly know that we would still work with packets and things like that. However, there would no longer be a remote option if we were all back in for students to access it. But Becky, if you want to talk about protocols changing.
Were there specific questions about it?
Just, are we following the same exact things that we have now as far as if you have the sniffles and staying home and quarantining?
As far as March? And yes, as of right now, we are keeping the same exact protocols as we have been. Nothing has changed as far as CDC, DESE, or DPH or anything. So everything's the same right now.
Fantastic.
Ms. Belville, I just want to come back to your comment that should we go all in, there still will be a remote option for parents who want it.
Oh, absolutely. But as far as if a child needed to quarantine, because of the fact that in hybrid, we were able to do that. But at Taft, we only have one remote teacher. So if a child was in an all-in classroom, those classroom teachers then provide packets at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Many people asked if Wednesday would still remain half day, and that is the case. With asynchronous in the afternoon.
And that's the case right now for our grade levels that are all in. I'm not sure should the commissioner change regulations and guidance on that, but that's where we're at right now.
There are many questions around the vaccine for employees and when will teachers be vaccinated, and does that affect our plans to return students all in?
So go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Becky.
Well, I don't even know if I really have the answer. The next phase, I believe, is teachers, right? Mm-hmm. So we are still trying to get the vaccine in town. We're supposed to be the hub of a regional clinic. So as soon as we get it and we are able to offer it to staff, we definitely will. It will be, like we said, the bus company, like everybody within Uxbridge public school systems or contract through them. But as soon as we can do it, we're definitely going to set that up. As far as it changing any regulations at school, as of right now, it's not planned because the children still aren't vaccinated, but the adults will be. So that's up in the air.
And through, Becky meets, is it weekly with the Department of Public Health?
Twice a week.
Twice a week with the Department of Public Health. And through our organizations, we're continuously working, with the state, just in terms of information. And there seems to be a growing understanding that there is going to be a flood of vaccinations coming soon. I don't know exactly what that means, but to your question, does that impact our plans? It's a factor in our plans. I'm not sure to what extent that impacts them. And again, as we've said probably 600 times in the last year, guidance in terms of from DESE, as well as working with our staff, and we'll work that out.
There's a question, is Whiten considered an elementary school?
Whiten is considered an intermediate school, and we looking for definition we were on a conference call with the commissioner, and he had mentioned elementary students. And I did not hear this directly. People believe that they heard him say pre-K to 5 would be elementary. some schools go, their elementaries go to 6, some go to 3, some go to 4, and so forth. Again, waiting to see what that guidance looks like, but I believe it's to grade 5.
There's a question around mask wearing and that why do we require mask wearing for our youngest learners? As is there a record of transmission from children to adults, and will we lift the mask wearing requirement?
We've not had that conversation, so that's not something I can speak to right now. I know that by wearing masks, our transmission rates are excellent. But that's not something we've discussed.
There's just a concern too about number of kids in the school. Even though the classes are small, there'll be more kids, there'll be more parents at pickup, kids on the bus. Do we have any concerns about all of them being there in the hallways or congregating in common areas? I don't know if you want to take that or you'd like Mr. Marco or I to take that.
You can speak to that, Ms. Belleville, but my understanding is systems that we have in place for safety right now would continue. Mask wearing, cohorts and so forth, but I'd let you or Mr. Marco speak to that.
Mr. Marco, I did make you a co-host, so you can unmute. I certainly can start by saying that we're still following the same protocols as far as for lunches and recess. Lunches will be had in the classroom. Recess will be spread out across fields, and they'll be with their classes. But as far as the hallways or congregating, we don't really do that. At bus time, students would just be walking down the hallway and getting on buses, so they would never be standing in any place for more than, for the max of 15 minutes in a large gathering. So all of our procedures would stay the same.
And that's the same for Whiten as well, particularly with 7th grade changing classes. They would still be following the same protocols. Everyone would still be staying 6 feet apart. Lunches would still be in the classroom. And we have the procedures now and will continue for arrival and dismissal, where all grade levels enter in different parts of the building. So there still wouldn't be any congregating in the hallways, and certainly not congregating or grouping or meeting together in common areas.
Mr. Rubin's not with us this evening, but that would be the same at the high school as well.
Perfect. There is a question around just the thought process, and I understand this has to do with the commissioner and the guidelines, but if you want to reiterate that, Dr. Tiano,
Sure.
Around changing the school model with 3 months left. People feel that we're very similar to last March, and that where we are having to change some staffing as well as change teachers for students or their model, there is a concern around that. So I don't know if you want to just speak to what we have been told by the state to do.
Well, I think first and foremost, I can't speak to what the commissioner is thinking, but I do know that the drive, where possible, if it's safe, to pull students back into the classroom and to be able to have that in-person learning where possible. And I understand that, and given where vaccinations are up, cases are down, our mitigation strategies are working, and so I understand that, and I appreciate that. We want our students, even 2 months, 3 months of in-person instruction, and to have students also to adjust to that new normal. Mr. Marco, she brought up at one of our meetings, just in terms of, 7th graders will be in the high school next year. They need to get up on time, get dressed, get their backpacks, and go to school. And they haven't done that, some of them, in such a long time. And ensuring that they, even for a short period, to have that in-person learning. What we've said from day one what we're doing in terms of educating our kids is not something as educators that we would sit and we would choose to do. I know, Miss Belleville, and just the time and effort and the absolute, the 1,000 different pieces in terms of bringing back a grade level. And that may have a student end up in another classroom for a few months. That is not ideal. That is not, and we're not saying it is, but we're saying it's a possibility.
There are a few questions just around the minimum distance protocols for 100% in person, and do we have enough space to do that, and what will a classroom look like?
That's a good question. In terms of, as we bring classes back now, grade levels back now, it is at the 6-foot distancing. If we remained and adhere to that guideline strictly, we could not bring back all of our students. The ones that we're able to bring back, pre-K to 4, grade 7, we're doing that. If that space was lower, then we could bring back more students.
Is there consideration for bringing the high school levels back at any point? Because we've only been talking about Whiten and Taft.
No, that's a good question. And there is definitely consideration for that. In terms of a variety of different factors that go along in bringing back high school students. And I wish Mr. Rubin were here, and as he could explain it better than I can. But just the complexity of students as they're changing classes, as well as different size classes. In Whiten, for example, we could say that there's 14 kids in each grade 6 class. Some electives have more students. Some classes have less students. The other issue there in terms of scheduling of testing and a variety of different things that happen at the high school. Mr. Rubin and Mr. DeMeglio are doing backflips to see what this looks like. So there is conversation there to answer that question.
There's a question around the buses. How will it impact the buses, more students on buses, and will families have the opportunity to revisit busing where driving 2 days a week is manageable, but 5 days a week could become more challenging for some families?
No, that's a great question. And, as we talked about at the outset of guidance continuously changing and coming down from the department, 2 weeks ago, right before vacation, we received new guidance on transportation. And essentially the capacity limitations and physical distancing requirements for students are lifted in elementary school and in middle school and high school. And there's some exceptions there. So as I understand it, the restrictions are lifted and we would be able to bus students to school if they had previously registered for the bus. We're not, we wouldn't be starting from scratch and having folks start registering from scratch. But that is something that we would put that guidance out in terms of our planning and what that looks like. I know Mr. Hyde and Mr. Young, who facilitates all of our transportation, they've been looking at this guidance since it came out. They've been working with our transportation provider, Vendetti Motors, and they've been looking at all of that good stuff.
There's a question about testing students. So Nurse Becky, they want to know if we're testing students, is that done through a nose swab?
Sorry, technical difficulties. Yes, it's going to be a nose swab, just like the Binax test, where it's just a shallow swab. It's not like the PCRs where they go deep. So it's just a nasal swab.
And,
Thank you.
and that's something that would happen only with parents' permission.
Right, and grades 2 through 12 can actually self-swab. The younger kids would be, obviously everyone's going to be monitored, but 2 through 12 can do it themselves.
And Nurse Becky and Ms. Schiller and Ms. Gothier have been working on the implementation of that. Again, we've applied to the state for this, and at our school committee meeting on Wednesday, I believe Tara Schiller will be providing some more detail around this.
Yep.
There's several questions about half-day Wednesdays and what does that look like, and will that continue with the all-in model? So will the dismissal at the half-day time and asynchronous continue on Wednesdays, and why?
As of right now, that is happening with our grade levels that have come in, and bringing back grade 4 and bringing back grade 7. That's still part of the plan. The commissioner may have a say in that. What that's been ideal for our staff in terms of providing the opportunity for them to work together, as what we're doing is essentially they need to keep learning, keep developing, keep assessing, and keep moving forward, and that time had been carved out for that. As of right now, and again, we're not done with plans moving forward again, but right now that's still in there.
Would the district consider implementing a virtual district remote model in the future?
That's a good question, and that's something that we've talked about at, I believe, just the high school. Students have the opportunity to take virtual classes. Oftentimes there are third-party providers for students who, for credit recovery, or connections that we have with community college. Quinn Sig, for example, are able to take online classes. And so as we work through this, you learn so much about how we do school and how we do education. And the idea coming out the other side of this pandemic is not to go back to what we've always done, but with our developed skills, what we've been able to put in place and try and see in action. We've talked about that. For some students, this has been ideal. For some students, not full time, but for a variety of situations, to have access to that, it is something that we're thinking about. There's no guarantee of that.
If the numbers rise again, is there a chance that the district would then go back to remote?
Well, it's what we've done and what other districts have done is we look at where the numbers are rising. The key for us, even as our district or our town was in the red for several weeks at a time, working with the Board of Health, we would look at where the positive cases were. If we could keep that bubble around our school, meaning that if there's little to no transmission in the schools, and as people were getting sick or contracting the virus outside of the schools, if we could identify them quickly, they stayed home and do our contact tracing, then our bubble within the schools were safe. And I would imagine that would be the case still going forward. Right now we're in the green, and that's good. But within our schools, we've been able to keep our fingers right on the pulse of what's happening. And I would imagine that would continue.
There are many questions about next year, about the process for class lists, about distancing. Are we continuing at 6 feet? Will we ever move to 3 feet? Will we be back all in? Is there remote? I know that that's far off right now, but that is something that many people have questions about. Is there a plan for us to hold a town hall in the spring when we have more guidance from the state, or how will we be communicating that out to families as they are anxious for next school year already?
Yes, no more anxious than we are in terms of making this happen. It's interesting. I know more about COVID than I did last month. I know more about testing than I did the month before, and that's me individually, and that's us collectively. And and this is why you see the guidance, I believe, change from the federal level to the state level to the longer we're in this, the more information, the more data, the more research being done, that we'll know more in another month from now, I guess is my point. And in a month from now, we will have a better understanding of where the vaccinations are. If this drop in cases, is this just a valley, or is this going to be our new normal? Because then you're going to be making those decisions within those contexts. I believe our goal is everybody's all in come September 3rd or 4th or whenever it is on our calendar for next year when we start. That's our belief. That's what we're looking forward to. And we'll have that information out to you. We'll have a town hall like this as soon as we have that.
And you would say the same, Dr. Tiano, regarding senior activities, prom, graduation, class night, things like that?
Absolutely. And those are things that, the high school team have been working on. What they've done with athletics has been absolutely extraordinary, and being able to provide those opportunities. And you have a team of folks, not only at the school, but across the district, are just dedicated to ensuring that our kids have the opportunities and experiences that they deserve to have at any time of year. But I know that's in the works. I can't speak to that. And I don't think Mr. Rubin would speak to that just yet, too, if he were able to be here this evening.
There is a question about students needing to take standardized testing or MCAS if they remain fully remote.
That's a good question. And I know the MCAS guidance has come out regarding that. I'm not recalling it right this second. And I would look to Mr. Marco and Ms. Belleville.
I actually am making Ms. Phillips a co-host right now. She might want to answer that. Wendy, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks. Right now the guidance is to get everyone in that we can. So we'll be encouraging families to bring students in. There isn't an option as of now to do the MCAS remotely. So we're looking at setting up the structures to be able to make it as safe as possible. And we'll be reaching out to remote families to make those arrangements.
And Wendy, it's our understanding that grades 3 through 8 will all be doing MCAS this year, correct?
Yes, grades 3 through 8 will all be doing MCAS this year, but they'll only be taking 1 day of assessment. And it's really being used so that schools can get an idea of curriculum and where we need to focus our instruction moving forward. So it's a scaled down.
And dates for MCAS will be sent out by Mr. Marco, myself, and Mr. Rubin within the next couple of weeks. Another question was around the concern around children's mental health and the impact on their learning, and what are we as a district doing for students who are returning from remote in, or with all students coming back into the building, as well as the plan for next year?
That's been a continuous concern for us, not only for our students, but for our staff as well. And we've been working a variety of different teams at the school level, at the district level. Let's say taking the temperature of our students, but that's not accurate. Being able to monitor our students in terms of where they are with their mental health. And there's a variety of systems in place at each school where our teams through the MTSS process, for example, are working on interventions for students on an individual basis, as well as right now, our teams are working on interventions not only for social and emotional issues regarding the pandemic, but also academic issues regarding the pandemic. As a team, will be proposing interventions on a larger scale beyond what we have typically for interventions for both academic and social and emotional. We do have funding through the federal government, through the Coronavirus Relief Act. And so we're looking to put that money to use for our students through the spring, over the summer, and into next year, next school year. That could materialize itself in programs, that could materialize in staff, that could materialize in a 1-week April vacation boost, either socially or academically. And through this latest round of assessment that our schools and our teams have gone through, we're really working on the process for those interventions in terms of who, the what, the how, the why, and again, thinking outside the box, particularly where we do have some funding, but that's related to COVID. Please know that there are interventions in place that we've been working with students right along with. Kind of a broad answer. Did that capture it there?
I think so.
Jen, Leanne? Okay.
I think that Mr. Marco and I will also be addressing some of that when we each hold individual building town halls. There's a lot of questions around pool testing, and are we doing pool testing, and what will that entail, and what does that look like?
Go ahead, Becky.
Sorry. So the pool testing, we most likely will be doing it. We just have to get approval from the state, like Dr. Tiano mentioned. I don't think they turn anyone away. So pool testing basically is you take, with consent from parents, those students and staff are swabbed, and depends on what vendor we get, but like if it's Project Beacon, which is who we're using for Binax, you take 10 samples and put them in one tube and send it to the lab. And then if that tube comes back negative, you do nothing. If it comes back positive, then you take all 10 of the people that are in that specimen and you use the Binax test to see if any of them come out positive, to identify the positive case. If that comes back negative, then you go to the PCR test to find out who was the positive case. And I was on a meeting today where that has actually happened, where they had a positive pool, but all tests came back negative. So a false positive. And that's pretty much it. Because everyone we tested once a week. I think that's pretty much it. We're still kind of working out the kinks.
Well, you're still working on the planning and the implementation of that. And when we hear back from DESE with approval,
Right.
we'll put that into action, but we'll share that with parents. And I've already seen part of the presentation that Nurse Becky and the nurses have put together, and it's quite clear. And on our website, linked to DESE, and you get a link right to pool testing. And I'll make sure I put that on, that's front and center, so that if folks read through that and they have specific questions, they could reach out to their child's school nurse.
I do want to point out, just to parents who opt out of the testing or who do not want their children tested, if a classroom has a pool that's positive, only the children in the pool will be retested. The other students in the classroom do not have to be tested. But if they are considered a close contact, then they would have to quarantine. I hope that makes sense.
Nurse Becky, the last question around pool testing is just who decides who gets pool tested?
It's parent permission. Whoever gives us permission, those staff or students will be tested weekly.
In the chat, I did put for everybody the link that Ms. Phillips has shared with everyone around a parent workshop of understanding the neuroscience of anxiety to support children during these times. So that's definitely a great workshop. If you are interested in attending, you will need to register for that, but I did send that in a link to everybody in the chat.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Phillips. There's still some questions, but I know we're running out of time, Dr. Tiano, just around classroom teachers and for Mr. Marco and I, with bringing students in, that we can't guarantee that students will stay with the same teachers, and what is the time frame. I know for us, we're looking at the March 22nd as time to return, and that I plan to send out more communication to families before the end of this week regarding a town hall next week, as well as any changes to class placement. I don't know, Mr. Marco, do you want to talk about your timeline too?
We are following the same timeline specifically for 4th grade, and we're hoping for 7th grade as well. But that's all dependent on the survey results that for the parents for 7th grade.
Perfect. Other than that, Dr. Tiano, I think that that is it. We will follow up with any other additional questions, as well as more information around pool testing and our plans to return.
All righty. As a reminder, our school committee meeting on Wednesday, we'll be talking more about pool testing as well. Thank you, Ms. Belleville, for facilitating. Thank you, team, for being available for questions. Parents, thank you so much for being with us here this evening. As always, if you have questions, you can reach out to me directly. You can reach out to any one of our administrators or nurses. And I really appreciate you taking the time this evening to join us. And we'll talk to you soon. Have a great night.